right, thanks everybody for your patience. We'll be getting started here in just a minute. So today for the FCC one-to-one consent, obviously a hot topic, a lot of people attending live, which is great to see. Working with resellers. Brett and I are going to be leading this one. A lot of people lead very formalized webinars. This is going to be much more informal and really talking, and because I have literally been on nothing but calls for probably the past 2 weeks straight, and everybody's got different use cases. So we are in a kind of a unique situation, being able to deal with a lot of different companies and a lot of different verticals. So try to really jump on here and kind of share our unique insights. One of the challenges has been really to try and, put a name to the use cases. So, we often will call things by clients, the client use case or so-and-so, and that doesn't really help everybody else. So what we've done here today is try to describe use cases based on just more general terminology and how companies are going to address that. And then also show how those work within the current standard API and form of the boberdoo system, and then also what settings those are, or what settings affect those different use cases in boberdoo. So we're going to dig into that here today. Again, this is going to be the first. We have one per month set until the FCC goes into effect. We will have some more kind of subbing in or supplementary along the way as well. But of course, if there are additional topics that you want to see, please don't hesitate to let us know. So things that we'll be chatting about today here, just to give you a preview, we'll be talking a lot about incoming pings from resellers and vendors, what that means, what exactly is a ping, and some of those details just at a high level. Everybody knows what a ping is, but not everybody knows what a ping is. Everybody's heard me say the devil's in the details, and never has it been more true than in the next few months. And then, what exactly happens when that ping comes in, and how that distribution logic is applied to that ping, whether that ping is coming from a dynamic consent form or an API. And then more specifically, how your lead system may currently behave versus how it will behave with these dynamic consent APIs, because there may be some differences here that we want to either test or address. I very conceitedly didn't even put my brother on the previous page, but we do have Brett on the call here. He's been working with the programmers and our clients on the API side and the custom delivery side with the responses. So we'll take a look at the bid ID specifically in Postman. So we'll take a look at more of the technical details in the custom delivery wizard. Briefly take a look at the boberdoo widget, which is what other people are calling the redirect example. So you can do the same thing with boberdoo. If you don't want to use boberdoo forms, you can build a boberdoo form that essentially serves as the last step to display the dynamic matching partners for the lead. So that gives you the ability to keep your own form, give your front-end developers some breathing room, and not have to rush to developing that two-step ping post process, FCC one-to-one consent. So when we get into these different use cases here, we have some people that are just looking, hey, I'm just going to be selling leads exclusively to retail. So we have some people that are just going to be selling leads exclusively to retail partners. I just want to get to the dynamic match. In that case, hey, I'm going to get the dynamic match. I'm going to put magic strings in the TCPA text. Then my business is not going to be affected all that much. But today we're going to be looking at, as I mentioned, the resellers. So to try and put a face to the name, so to speak, we're going to start covering these 4 specific cases today. So we have exclusive match, exclusive display, exclusive match, non-exclusive display, exclusive match, non-exclusive match, non-exclusive display, exclusive match, and exclusive display with redirect. So these refer to the match in partners in your system, and then the display the companies to the consumer. So as we get into these in the lead system here, lots of details that we will cover. Okay, so we're going to hop into home model as the lead system and really start covering the pings. So when we look at the incoming pings in the source vendor settings, that's really where we're living these settings here. We have the ping delivery timeout as being something that you may have received emails from your vendors saying that they're imposing certain timeouts. That is becoming more important because the consumer is now going to be on that page, and the lead generator is going to be sending partial information just to kind of set the stage, give you a preview. It could be something as simple as going through the ping fields of a home improvement lead project and zip code to get the dynamic matching companies. Well, in that case, they are say, I need a bid from you in that amount of time. Well, what happens when that ping comes into your boberdoo system? Well, your boberdoo system has to evaluate your best revenue scenario to figure out if you can bid on that lead and how much you can pay for that lead. So first off, it has to look at all of your partners, whether all of your partners are fixed price partners. So are they direct post, meaning that you have a price in the filter set and you know how much you're going to charge them. And so all boberdoo has to do is evaluate the filter set itself to determine if it matches. Or are they a dynamic buyer, meaning that you have to ping out to that buyer and let them tell you if they're going to bid on that lead? And so how long is that buyer going to take to return a bid back to you? And all of that factors in how long it takes you to return a bid back to your source. So with boberdoo, you can control all of that at the ping delivery timeout level. And it is a negotiation, right? Your vendor is going to want it to be or your reseller, your vendor is going to want it to be as short as possible. You obviously want it to be as long as possible, giving you the greatest chance to build the biggest bid. But you can control that here. By default, it's historically been 30 seconds. But as you can see here, you can set that per source. Now, the way that boberdoo builds your bid is that we wait until this delivery timeout, the maximum amount, and we then cut off any buyers that have not returned a bid in this amount of time in order to build your bid and return this back to the vendor in this allotted time. So you have to, one, build yourself a buffer. So for example, if affiliate source says, I need a bid returned back in 8 seconds, you want to allow yourself time to build the final processing. boberdoo processes the lead in about 500 milliseconds or less. So you want to then give yourself a little buffer here, build the timeout at 7 seconds so that you can then build your final bid, carve out your margin, and return your bid back to the vendor in the allotted time.
And I'll just add to that, that this is, like Scott mentioned before, like a communication or a negotiation that you'll have with the vendor or the affiliate that's sending you the leads. And it's not going to be just as simple as changing the delivery timeout to be a lower value, right? What I mean by that is, if you have a problem buyer that's taking, say, 30 seconds or 20 seconds to respond on the ping, right? You're better off removing that buyer from the accepted sources, so you don't even ping them, rather than lowering your timeout to cut them off. And because, right, like it's a situation where these pings come through, this exact scenario we're looking at on the screen right now, the source name is affiliate, the ping timeout is 7 seconds. They send the ping into your boberdoo system. We find, say, 10 different buyers. We fire the ping out to all of them at the same time. After 7 seconds elapse, if we do not have all of the responses from all your buyers, we then are abandoning anyone who has not responded yet. And so there could be a situation where your buyer is saying, hey, I'm responding and bidding after 20 seconds, but your system is not even considering it because it's cutting off at 7 seconds. And so it can't just be only changing the source timeout. It also needs to be a communication to the buyer. Hey, buyer, you're taking 20 plus seconds. We're essentially turning you off from this particular source because you're taking too long. So it's not just, hey, I'm going to put a Band-Aid over it and lower the timeout. It's kind of like a full scale communication with the vendor, yourself, and even the buyer sometimes.
And then to continue on with that, Brett, you may have 6 out of your 7 buyers that are 1 second, and then one buyer that's taking forever, which means that you're holding up the entire
form
flow.
is being
You could be
weighted up.
having a consumer that is getting a flow in 1 second, except that you're waiting the full allotted time every single time because of that one buyer.
One
and
buyer's
so that's
holding
where
back the whole process. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's where, forgive us, me specifically, if I get a little preachy, but I know, historically you get an integration, the integration works. And so oftentimes you can, all's well that ends well. And as long as the integration is technically set, but in these cases, there will most likely have to be more communication, ongoing communication with reseller relationships. And so, to that effect, Boberdoo is looking at, what we have to do to increase transparency with things like reports. So, for example, pure exports won't work great for this because there's millions of pings, and just looking at small subsets of timeouts won't help. So we are looking at building averages and standard deviations so that you can look at greater data sets to try and find those problem deliveries that are regularly causing these lags in the overall consumer flow.
Yeah, the idea to have some type of file or something that shows you, that will say, all right, here are your 20 custom deliveries that are running today. Here are their average time on the ping, right? Here's where 95% of them are around on their ping response. Here's how many total ping attempts they've had for that custom delivery, to then have that average broken down. So that way you can have that data to go back to the buyer and say, hey, you're taking a long time here. We need to, if you're going to be seeing all of our best traffic, that's going to have to be, shortened up on your end.
So along those lines, delivery timeout on the post is also something that is important, although less so. So 60 seconds has always been default, but those are also something that you may want to consider, and we also evaluate as well. Something else that also now plays into count on the ping is outside services. So in the ping flow, you can build lead scoring that scores the ping or does a lookup, now is factored into that consumer experience or into that ping timeout that the lead generator may give you. So again, on the ping, that time has to be factored in. So, we have seen some emails where a lead generator may say 1 second, for example. In those cases, you have to be
good luck,
realistically be able to realistically evaluate what you can process in that amount of time. And again, when you look at defaults, the default timeout for an outside service is 10 seconds. We can adjust those, make those whatever you want. But you then also have to look at those outside services and what those timeouts are, because if to an outside service and their average response time is 2 seconds, you're setting yourself up for failure if you turn it on for a vendor that is expecting a 1 second response.
In addition to that, you can also consider the settings that you have at the outside service level for what should happen if the service ends in an error. So let's say it does time out, right? And they don't return back a response. Let's say real phone validation, right? You're trying to check the phone. It comes back. There's no response from RPV. They're having issues. They're down, whatever. There's no response back for them saying it's a good phone or it's not a good phone. Like, what should happen in that situation? What to do if service ends with an error? We'll handle that scenario of what you want to do. But that's kind of a business decision, right? Like, should it go to another service or should it just go and process? Do you want to fail it as a kind of a, pre-thing to not have to worry about if it was a bad phone? So we have that option in the system for you to then determine what should happen if those kind of fringe case scenarios happen where they time out.
It looks like we have a chat there if you want to take a look at that.
Take a look.
So that brings us to the distribution logic of the ping post consent API. This is something that is very important. The API and the boberdoo dynamic consent form. So just to point out what we are talking about here, we are talking about ping post consent API and ping post consent API redirect, and the boberdoo form, dynamic consent form type specifically, follow the same logic. So these APIs follow specific logic that are irrespective of your distribution logic in your lead type. So as you know, boberdoo has different distribution logic, which may be best price or priority or weighted logic. Dynamic consent APIs and forms are built to a best revenue scenario. They are all built to the same logic. And so what that means is we evaluate the incoming ping based on the best exclusive filter set compared to the non-exclusive filter sets, the sum of the non-exclusive filter sets up to the maximum partners per lead. So what that means is that many of you are on best revenue scenario in your main lead types already. So it is one and the same. And so in some cases, it's only certain lead types or fringe lead types that would be different. So in many cases, there is no effective difference. I just wanted to point that out because that API and form behaves standard exactly this way. So if we look again at that affiliate source, the API and the form builds your best revenue scenario up by comparing 3 non-exclusive filter sets, or up to 3 non-exclusive filter sets, and compares that against the best exclusive filter set, and then displays that scenario to the consumer. So we're going to get into those resellers here, but that is the setting. So when we look at that is the source setting. And then more specifically, when we get into the filter sets, we are looking at the exclusivity setting. So some of you may have different options in the exclusivity setting here. None and exclusive are the current settings for simplification purposes. What we are basically looking at is exclusive versus everything else. So exclusive means that if it matches to this filter set, it can only match to this filter set. For this demo purposes, none means that it can match to up to whatever those partners per lead in the source settings is.
All right, so looking at the actual ping post consent API, so this would be an example if you were going to build your own form, submit the leads through, you're going to give this to a reseller or vendor to send you leads through ping post through the new consent option. So these are consent specs. They are in your system right now. Settings, API specs, they're in alphabetical order, ping post consent. Just like your ping post lead, they're all developed based on your lead type fields that you have in your system. This is just going into our home model demo system just to kind of show you what everything looks like. So when a ping is sent through the ping post consent API, you can see there's nothing really additional that's sent, right? Just the main ping required fields for the lead type, the same type of required fields that we currently have. So for anyone that's switching over from the existing ping post lead to ping post consent, it's really just, we would like to say two things. One is the action has to be changed from ping post lead to ping post consent. That's really the only required one, but we like to say, like, if you're going to set up someone that's existing, you should do a definitely new source value, right? Create a new source value in your system so you can differentiate which ones are coming through the consent one, which ones are not. And so when we send this ping, then it then is sending a ping into your boberdoo system. It's going to look for the matches just like we would regularly do for the normal ping post lead. The differences, though, come when the lead is matched on the ping. When that happens, we're going to have a bunch of extra information, most notably who the ping is matching to. All right, and so that's kind of notated here in this bids section. And then there's multiple here. You see there's two different bids, two different offers. And from here, we have the ID value from the boberdoo system, matching partner ID, their name, their HTML, which is pulled from their HTML offer, which I'll show in a second here. And then, of course, their lead bid, their lead price, whatever they're going to be buying the lead for or offering for the lead. That's, again, just one particular offer. There's then another one here that shows a different company, right? Different ID, different bid ID, which I'll get to in a second, different bid price, right? Here in the process information, it's kind of a summary, right? We have two total bids. The total bid between the sum of them, right, is 59, 30 plus 29. It's not unmatched, so there's not an unmatched reason. Timestamp is for debugging purposes. This, for example, if you come to us and say, hey, boberdoo, what's wrong with this particular ping response? Now we can grab this stamp and go right into the logs of Amazon and their Amazon S3 servers to find the exact records. Just kind of speeds up the whole process. Nothing important for anyone here. That's more of a something that I'm enjoying on my end. But either way, this response, as you can see, right, showing who it can sell to, how much it can sell for. All right. So in this case, right, this could then be presented back for the consumer to pick which one they want to try to sell the lead to, or who they want to be matched with, I should say. So let's use the example. I'm just going to send this again so I have a fresh one. Let's say that they chose gray roofing. In that case, when the post comes through, we have to send two extra fields. We have to send which bid ID is chosen. And then, of course, we need to send the lead ID as well. That tells the system, hey, it's this lead ID record. And for that lead ID record, this is who was chosen to process the lead to. So knowing 3449, and I'm grabbing this one. So I'm going to go to another request here, where we're sending the mode equals post, just like we would normally do. Now we have all the other information. Phone, email, name, the lead ID was 3449, and the bid ID I want to match with was the gray roofing one, which is 8519. Now if that sends, of course it got unmatched. Let's take a look and see why. So now when we go back to the leads page and I refresh, we can come here, we can see the lead come into the system and be particularly unmatched because the price being too low. So let's go back and choose both of them. So let's say they chose both of them. We do the ping, we get the same idea back here, two different matches. We want 8523 and 8525. We're going to do both of them. You do comma separated if you want to do multiple. So let's say it returned back 4, right? You do comma separated 4 values if that's what was chosen, right? We choose that. Send the post through. At this post request is trying to match to the buyer. In this case, it then sold to both Gray Roofing and Roof Roofing on the post step. And here, if we refresh the lead in the system, we can see then who it was sold to. And so it's something else to consider here on these leads page. You'll notice that the show lead log icon is lit up green if it is a dynamic consent lead. It'll show the normal color, I think it's gray, if it's submitted not through dynamic consent. So just a easy visual cue that you have to see which ones were coming through consent and which ones were not. So for this lead that we just submitted, let's take a look. Kind of the same idea here. We found two different buyers, right? Those were who was returned back in the ping response. This is who was ultimately chosen, and then the posts were successful. So kind of full stream there. It found two matches. We chose both of them and then posted it through to then sell it to those two that were chosen. So as far as where the API is grabbed, I kind of brushed over that at the beginning, but here under settings and then under API specs, you will see there is one specifically for ping post consent. And when you click on that, you'll see your lead types listed here, where you can then click to choose what lead type it's for, which then displays all the appropriate fields. Then if we scroll down to the bottom, you can see the responses as well. So this is identical to what we were just looking at in those postman responses, right? Where it returns back the multiple information. If there's multiple bids, right, it's got the multiple sections here. If there's a single bid only, it will just have the one single bid section. But then the whole response is dedicated here to show all that extra information and then pull that back to the reseller. In addition to that, right, there's kind of a whole nother level to how this can work then, right? You have to have, if you are then selling to a reseller again, they are reselling to someone, right? They return back, let's say you're selling to ABC company who is reselling to someone else, John Doe Roofing, we'll say, right? On your response, you can't put ABC company here, right? You need to have the reseller's company name so that you can display that or have it displayed back to the reseller, because that's who's you're actually giving consent to, right? For the reseller company to contact you, not for ABC company. So this is all done within the custom delivery wizard inside your boberdoo system. So let's go through just a sample one we have configured here. There's essentially a snippet of code that says, hey, find me all of this information of the matching buyer information to grab and return back in the response. So for example, the name, like we grabbed it from the company seller name section, we grabbed the ID from the bid ID section, and so on and so forth. So it is kind of a multi-part. If you are selling to resellers, the custom delivery has to be configured to grab the reseller name and the reseller info instead of the wholesale, I guess you could call it, or
the reseller company name itself.
Yeah, the reseller company name back so that it's shown. And so, just to show you real quick, so here in the ping response, we did another new fresh ping. It found gray roofing, roof roofing again, but then it found another company to be returned back. But the Beatles aren't anywhere in the whole model system, right? If I go back now to the partners here, there's no one named the Beatles. But when we look at the custom delivery, and now we're going to do pings only to see that mode equals ping that we just submitted through, we can see that in the ping out to the external system, one of their buyers, their best bid from their end was the Beatles. So we grabbed the best bid from this one and combine them with these other, depending on the exclusivity, right? These are all non-exclusive, so it works. But just to show you that it then grabs the reseller company name to then return it back all the way to either the form or the API. Again, passing through the full reseller.
So that actually is going to bring us back to use cases, right? So Brett covered in the custom delivery a couple of different reseller use cases there, right? Is the reseller returning multiple companies? Is the reseller returning one company? And so, as the boberdoo client, how are you working with your partners? What is your business? What is your use case? So we'll come back to the widgets here. Selling exclusively with dynamic magic strings is, a pretty easy use case. You're selling retail to different partners in your system, whether you're working with affiliates or your own O&O stuff. The use case after the FCC probably doesn't change a whole lot, right? You have magic strings. You can dynamically insert the matching partner into your standard TCPA text, and then you're simply replacing that link out maybe that you have to a big list of potential matching companies with a more specific single company that matches to that request, and it's a better consumer experience and everybody's happy. But when we're talking about resellers, as we're seeing it, is more complicated. You have not only the match of the reseller, but then also what is it, an exclusive match of the end selling company? Is there multiple matches within the end selling company? How is that consent being collected? And then also, how is the bid being done? And how is the bid being calculated? That's really where it gets really complex. So we're going to take these one by one. So we have exclusive match, exclusive display. The way that is set up in Boberdoo is by simply doing one partner per lead at the source level, and then also setting the filter set to exclusive. That controls both the display and the matches to be exclusive. So your reseller, doesn't matter if the reseller returns more than one partner or one partner. You're in the delivery, your system then caps it at one partner at the display level, and it captures one bid at the best revenue calculation level. And so if you're looking as a business to do exclusive matches with exclusive display, we can then set it accordingly. When we look at exclusive matches with non-exclusive display, that is the use case where you are looking to ping multiple resellers at the same time, capture their bid for a lead as a whole. And so this is a very important distinction to make. That reseller is bidding for the lead as a whole. Presumably, they are going to return multiple companies in their response, and they are taking the risk that the consumer is going to select more than one company, and then you are presenting whichever companies are selected by the consumer, and that reseller is simply accepting or rejecting the entire post as a whole. What that means is that when the bid comes in, if they bid $25, they are bidding $25 for the whole lead. If they present 5 companies, going back to the source level and our affiliate example, 3 companies. If the consumer selects 1, 2, or 3, the lead is marked as sold for $25 if they accept the post. Presumably, this can be a whole lot of questions, right? There's presumably the resellers are going to post reject more leads because there's less profitable situations that they can accept a post at $25. If they're bidding for a lead based on $25 and returning 3 companies, presumably there's less post scenarios that they can accept that lead at $25. But that's, of course, speculation on my part here. But in terms of the transaction, again, you're paying all of your resellers. They're returning company or companies in the response. You are presenting those to the consumer, collecting which consent is presented to the consumer, and then posting those through the custom delivery to that reseller. They are saying success or error. And then in the So the big things here as we look at Raise Connected Solar, the big difference is when we look in the lead system, that is a single transaction in the lead system at a single dollar amount. So that lead is sold for a single transaction. So when you are carving out margin for, a vendor, for example, you are not taking an individual bid for their individual companies, right? You are bidding for this partner as a whole. So you have to look at them as an exclusive. When we look at the settings that are associated with this setup of exclusive match, non-exclusive display, we need to have filter sets that are exclusive. So the filter set itself has to be exclusive. And the source settings partners per lead have to be non-exclusive, more than one. And then again, whatever you want that to be, in this case it is 3, we would return up to 3 matching partners from that reselling company that was returned in the custom delivery. So then we come to non-exclusive match, non-exclusive display. This is Boberdoo's recommendation. The nice thing here is that this works with retail and resellers in your Boberdoo system. So this gives you the most flexibility in bringing on retail partners and resellers in your Boberdoo system. If you did have exclusive match partners in your system, or if you did have non-exclusive resellers in your system that were returning individual companies in their response and individual bids for those individual companies, then you can then essentially build your own non-exclusive revenue scenario on each ping and have that compared against your best exclusive scenario. So when it comes to maximizing your revenue, when it comes to maximizing your aggregate demand for your lead generators, your publishers, I believe that this gives you the best chance, because in your case, even if you only had one retail partner, then you would still return that partner less your margin in that ping response. And so if you look at that, in the aggregate across the industry, that gives the lead generators the ability then to create a more comprehensive list of matching partners to the consumer. That gives the lead generators the better ability to monetize their lead forms, reduce those conversion and their fears of reduction in conversion or monetization that they're facing. And the better that they can do that, the better that you sit in this whole ecosystem post FCC. So that brings us to exclusive match, exclusive display with redirect. So what this is I believe some networks or platforms have said, don't change anything. You post us the lead. If we accept the post, we will then send you a URL. You can then redirect the consumer, and we will handle all of the consent from our side here. We do see some issues with that, namely, you lose all insight as to what happens to the consumer. So if you are a lead generator, I do believe there are some things in there about you having to collect consent as well. So I don't see how that could be done. But you also lose any insight as to what the consumer behavior is, what they're opting into, those types of things. So that would be consideration that you would want. But from a technical standpoint, it can be done. So in this case, when we're looking at settings, exclusive match, exclusive display, very similar to the top one. So we need to have a source partners per lead. This needs to be 1. So that there can be only one match. And then back to the filter sets, you may have guessed, we need to have an exclusive filter set selected here. So that's going to make sure we lock down a 1-to-1 on our filter sets. And then in the delivery, there is the option to capture the redirect URL. And so essentially the ping comes in, and just like in these other scenarios, if the exclusive, based on their distribution logic, if the exclusive match is the best revenue scenario, if the custom delivery has the redirect URL associated with it, we will return that in the response. If you're using the API, then you can grab that. I believe API instructions have some code that you can use to convert it to a widget, or you can actually redirect the URL, redirect the consumer to the URL there for the rest of the flow. Boberdoo came from, we have lots of clients that did payday or personal loan, 10 plus years ago. So we know what's going to happen here. They will go towards, maintaining a click-through rate eventually. Boberdoo has built those types of reporting into the lead type. We are making plans eventually, if this is something that sticks, for that type of lead behavior, but there's a lot of database reports and tables that have to be built in order for that type of tracking and IP tracking to be built in there. So we have started that activity. So, and then that brings us to selling retail and resellers. As I mentioned, if you choose to use the non-exclusive match, non-exclusive display, we believe that gives you then the ability to sell to retail and resellers, both exclusively and non-exclusively on a per lead or per ping basis with both resellers and your O&O stuff. And that gives you the most flexibility to take advantage of whatever buyer relationships that you have. Because each individual lead is evaluated uniquely when it comes into the system. So as things change, they're evaluated to try and monetize that lead at that point in time. So the last thing then I want to bring up here is Boberdoo's widget example. So this can be used in a lot of different ways. As I mentioned, it might be the use case of you have a form now, your programmers, your front end are going to be working on converting your form to a dynamic consent. Maybe a case of you want to implement a redirect URL now. So there's a couple of different options here. We have kind of a base use case set up here, preview of a form. Obviously, I am not a front end developer, so this is just a preview. But the idea here is that, this is just a form that you have now. Yours would look much better, but you can, bring the consumer. So again, with one-to-one consent, they would presumably have some sort of TCPA text, but what would they be opting into? Maybe you have newsletter or some sort of tech language that they're opting into first, so that you can get them in here. They then are redirected to the boberdoo form. Essentially, this is the dynamic consent, the final step, which is the results of the ping. So here you'll see this has all of their pre-filled information that was passed from your form. It has the dynamic matching partners along with the Beatles, which was returned from the
reseller.
That Brett had set up. So in this use case here, Boberdoo built the best revenue scenario amongst the two retail partners in Home Model. And then we added the individual company that was returned from a reseller up to 3 partners, that maximum that was set at the source level, to build the best potential revenue scenario for this ping. And now the consumer can say, I want so-and-so, but not him or her. And then we can then see, bringing to our final scenario, about things like post rejects. So we're going to cover this here in a second. But as you can see, we still have a long way to go, because what happens with post rejects. But the idea here is, with that widget, you can redirect them essentially to that final ping scenario to display those dynamic matching companies for that specific request. So when we go to the working with resellers and our final 2 minutes, we have questions. So when we have APIs, what do you want to happen with post rejects? We have options built into the form builder, because that's for people that they're O&O stuff. So for example, in the form, we have an option when there are no matches on the ping to continue with the form. And then we have options when there are post rejects to submit the lead as a standard. And then we are working on things like a carousel or resubmission options for post rejects. But those are things that we're working with on clients, because there are different use cases depending on verticals and automatic versus manual resubmissions and presenting the next match back to the partner. And all of that depends on whether you have an exclusive match or a non-exclusive match. And so when you're talking about APIs, this is where the forms and APIs deviate. So this is where we're looking to our clients to really understand what is the expected behavior on post rejects in API responses. Before, Boberdoo automatically processed the next best revenue scenario until the next best revenue scenario was less than the bid that was returned back to the vendor. So we did it automatically until we couldn't monetize the lead, and then we post rejected it back to the vendor or back to the response on the form or in the API response. And so now that is essentially done at step one. So we no longer have an automatic step two that's a clear-cut path. Then we're looking for our clients for more information and things that where do we go from here? What are options that you're looking to take? So I know I ran right up at the full hour. There was a lot that we wanted to get out on this call, and I thank you for all of everybody that stuck with us through this.
Yeah, we've been taking down your questions as you've been writing them in here too. So
we do have some extra time here. So I will stay on for another 10 minutes to talk about these questions for everybody that wants to stay on. Anybody that has calls, please, thanks, and we'll get these recordings out here. All right. So looking at questions here, Brett, can you serve them up to me and we can talk about them?
Yeah, so we kind of touched upon Vince's first one about the response times. We're going to have that in similar to that, but not exact to what you're looking for. Like Scott said, it's going to be on the delivery side as opposed to the source. And so then the next one, I don't know, you didn't get to that one, right, about Tyler's.
So like when you're talking about bidding on the leads, right, we touched on if you are, when you're talking about carving out bids, right now you have the ability to basically carve out margin at the source level, at the filter set level, by dollar amount, by percentage amount. And that gets very complicated with math. We are looking at ways to try and reduce the complexity and making everything based on percentages as one reduction in complexity. When we get to the use cases, when you're looking at the non-exclusive match, non-exclusive display, you have to bid on the lead per individual company, right? You can no longer bid on the lead as a whole, because if you are returning individual companies back to another reseller, and that reseller and you're returning an individual bid for each of those companies, then you are basically going to then pay based off of which selections the consumer makes. So versus, let's say, the reseller that is bidding for the lead as a whole. So those things do change, and which of those reseller use cases that you are working with will depend on how you are carving out margin and how you set up the system, and how you run your reports. So there's not really a one way. Those use cases are going to be more and more vital, because you can't bid for the whole lead. I mean, if you build a bid based on 5 partners and you bid $100 and the consumer selects one, and you pay $100, how long can you do that and stay in business? Do you want to go to the next one? Joe's. What do you think is the best way to manage multiple client partners with different one-to-one consent requirements? Some can work on a ping post-consent action you just sold. Others require redirect. Some want one-to-one captured before. Some want after the post. Others aren't ready for some. How can we best manage all of these different types of partners? Well, I think that's where, I think that that's a very difficult task, right? Like, how do you manage? I mean, one, as a business, do you want to try to manage every single partner every single way? I don't know that that is possible, right? Do you can you manage every single partner every single way? I think as a business, you have to make some decisions on what you can manage. And you have to implement some, you have to implement some decisions like, you know, are you going to work with all of these? Are you going to only work with some of them? Um, if you say yes, you're going to work with all of those, then you have to establish an organizational structure and process that allows you, to have to work with all of them. So that is where things like labeling is going to be even more important than before. So you can label, we have primary labels, we have secondary labels, we have that at the partner label, we have it at the filter label, we have it at the source label, and you're going to have to spend time setting up a structure and then setting up an onboarding process for your partners that that you, well, one, that you classify them according to one of those processes. Two, that you verify that they have it. So like if they say that they're this type of process, that they actually are. So that speaks to things like vetting the company during the onboarding process and things like that. Um, and all of that can be set up, but it's establishing the process, it's labeling them, and then it's periodic follow-ups in that flow. Um, so it's a lot more than the quick add new partner like it might have been before. All right. Okay. If 90% retail buyers, 10% aggregators that might multi-sell. So to kind of bring that to the vernacular we tried using here, exclusive match, non-exclusive display would be what we called it here. Is there a way to calculate at the aggregator level whether you should display the exclusive or multi-sell options, given that the consumer might not check all of the multi-options, which would lower the overall changes? Yes, there is a way. That is, I mean, it's a question for your landing page, right? It's an A/B test of your front end, right? You have to do A/B testing of how many partner companies that a consumer, when presented with five, how many on average they're going to select. But it's nothing that you're going to be able to do, programmatically at the system level, because it's going to be landing page specific, vertical specific type of A/B testing. So let's see, Tyler here. With the new law, the customer can select any businesses they want. That could be one or five, 1, 2, 3, 4, or five. It's not actually limited to five. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I would say you definitely want to, definitely seek your in-house legal counsel, but they did not specify a number. You can do whatever you want. To the previous answer, this is really where front-end A/B testing comes in. What is the right for your vertical and your landing page and value proposition? So like, we chose three just for this demo purposes. You can pick, that's A/B testing. Test whatever, whatever you can realistically show. And then going back to that, the best revenue scenario, like for those of you that deal in hyper geo-focused areas, like when you set up partners per lead of 10 and you have, something that's like really competitive in Los Angeles, California, and something that's not competitive at all in, Utah, like, well, it's an exclusive scenario. And so you have one matching partner in Utah, but hey, guess what? You display 10 roofing partners in LA County because you have 10 partners that want to buy a lead, and you just 3x your revenue on those campaigns. So that's it's something to consider there. So the redirect URL can be shown in an iframe widget that stays on the same website through Janaya, so the trusted form. I believe there's some coding that can be done. I'm not a front end developer, so you want to ask somebody else on that. But I believe there is some code there. And then Doug with our last one here. If buying leads as a reseller, but no one is robo-dialing or texting, what are your thoughts on the one-to-one rule being irrelevant? I think that I think the concept of no consent dialing a consumer is hilarious. Given as somebody who's been in the lead business for almost 20 years now, and the fact that my phone gets no less than 15 phone calls a day, people that are calling me for a auto finance or an auto warranty or an MCA test lead that I submitted 20 years ago, or a auto insurance or a health insurance lead that I submitted 10 years ago, Doug, I would say that I am all for the one-to-one consent personally. I think that this is doing a good job of whether or not this is the right rule. Nothing that regulations do is the right rule, because very rarely do regulations hit the nail on the head. But I think that what boberdoo forms and the ability to dynamically display to a consumer the actual companies that are going to be contacting them, I think that does do a good thing. And I think that ultimately, in a lot of these verticals, it will help lead generators, get their real-time leads, increase their value by reducing, some of the aged leads that kind of muddied the waters, and then I think it'll help the real lead buyers connect to those real leads, and kind of hopefully, knock on wood, there's a lot of wood up here. Hopefully, kind of clean out some of the noise. So I know I took everybody's time, a ton of it today. I appreciate it greatly. We'll get this processed here, and I look forward to everybody's thoughts, questions, and additional issues and questions as they come up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Appreciate it.